There is a famous piece of arithmetic in financial circles that says the first $100,000 is the hardest, but once you get there, you are actually 1/3 of the way to $1 million. The math is sound. It is based on the exponential curve of compound interest. But there is a massive, invisible friction that this math ignores, and it is the reason why so many households earning high incomes feel like they are barely treading water, let alone swimming towards 7 figures. We tend to focus on the obvious expenses, like housing. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics consumer expenditures for 2024, the average household spends $26,266 a year on shelter alone. That is roughly 33.4% of total spending. We see that number. We feel it leaving the bank account. But underneath that primary rent, there is a developing economic phenomenon, a second rent, that is silently consuming the margin you need to build wealth. This second rent isn't paid to a landlord. It is paid to an army of services, apps, and conveniences that we have convinced ourselves are essential just to keep our lives functioning. And until you identify it, the math of that first $100,000 will remain a fantasy. To understand why this happens, we have to stop looking at money for a moment and look at the clock. There is a concept known as time poverty. It is the state of having plenty of tasks to do but not enough hours to perform them. A study by the Levy Economics Institute in 2025 found that roughly 39% of single adults suffer from time poverty, with employed women experiencing it at a rate 9 percentage points higher than men. When you are time poor, your decision-making architecture changes. You stop solving problems with your labor, and you start solving them with your wallet. This is the birth of the second rent. It is the aggregate cost of every service you hire to replace the domestic labor you no longer have the energy to do. In previous generations, weekends might have been for car maintenance, deep cleaning, or meal prepping. Today, in a dual-income household, which the Bureau of Labor Statistics notes makes up 49.6% of all married couple families, those hours are already sold to the employer. You cannot sell the same hour twice. The most aggressive component of this second rent is the cost of simply going to work. We often view a car as a tangible asset, but for the modern worker it is a subscription fee for employment. The data shows that transportation costs averaged $13,318 per year in 2024. That is 17% of total spending. But reasonable people might disagree on whether a car is a convenience or a necessity. Where the nuance disappears is when we look at how much support we get for that commute. Despite the high cost of getting to the office, the Bureau of Labor Statistics TIDE data reveals that in 2024, only 10% of private sector workers had access to commuting subsidies. This dynamic creates a funnel. You work hard to earn a high salary. That job requires a reliable, likely newer vehicle, and perhaps a toll pass. That job also exhausts you, meaning you are less likely to cook, clean, or manage the household logistics when you return home. Let's look at the most significant line item for families: child care. This is no longer just a budget item. It is a crisis of fixed overhead. Child Care Aware of America reported in 2024 that the average annual price of child care was $13,128. That represents a 29% increase since 2020. If you are a parent, you know that number often feels conservative. What is more alarming is the velocity of this expense. The Bank of America Institute found that in September of 2025, childcare payments rose 5.2% year over year. When you combine housing, transportation, and childcare, you are often looking at 70 to 80% of a take-home paycheck for a middle to upper middle class family. And this brings us back to the math of the first $100,000. The theory assumes you have a shovel, your surplus income, to dig your way out of the early accumulation phase. But the second rent breaks the handle of the shovel. This phenomenon is accelerated by how frictionless spending has become. We have detached the pain of payment from the act of purchasing. The Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta's Diary of Consumer Payment Choice shows that the average amount of cash a person carries dropped from $81 in 2023 to just $67 in 2024. We don't carry cash because we don't need it. We tap, we click, we subscribe. When you are time poor and exhausted, the friction of getting cash out of a wallet might be enough to stop a frivolous purchase. Let's pause and walk through the math of a hypothetical household to see how this destroys wealth building. Imagine a couple, Sarah and Mike. They are doing well on paper. Together they bring in $160,000 a year. After taxes and standard deductions, let's assume their monthly take-home pay is roughly $9,500. First, the primary rent. They have a mortgage and property taxes in a decent suburb, costing them $3,200 a month. Now the second rent begins. They both work downtown. They have 2 cars. Between payments, insurance, gas, and maintenance, they are spending $1,100 a month. They have a toddler. Full-time daycare is $1,400 a month, a bargain in this economy. Here is where the convenience creep sets in. Because they are both working 50-hour weeks, plus commuting, they do not cook from scratch. They use a meal kit service during the week and order delivery twice on weekends. That is $800 a month on food that isn't groceries. They hire a cleaner twice a month because their weekends are consumed by parenting and exhaustion. That is $300. They have a dog walker come 3 times a week because they are stuck at the office. We are now down to $2,450. Out of this, they must pay for utilities, phones, internet, student loans, clothes, and general groceries. They are left with $450 a month. At that rate, saving their first $100,000 will take them 18.5 years. And that assumes no emergencies, no roof repairs, and no medical deductibles. If they could simply save $2,000 a month, they would hit that $100,000 milestone in just 4 years. The difference between 4 years and 18 years is the second rent. Of course, this doesn't apply if you are in the top 1% of earners where income vastly outpaces even the most luxurious convenience costs, and it doesn't apply if you live in a low cost of living rural area where the pressure to outsource is lower. There is a valid counterargument here. You might say, but Marcus, that money buys sanity. If I didn't pay for the cleaner and the takeout, I would burn out, lose my job, and earn zero. This is a fair point. Strategic outsourcing can be an investment in your career capital. If paying $300 for cleaning allows you to study for a certification that raises your salary by $10,000, the math works in your favor. But rarely is that the case. Most often we buy time not to produce more but to recover from the production we just did. Another counterargument is that inflation is the real villain and not just lifestyle choices. It is true that the cost of goods has risen, but notice that the specific inflation sectors we highlighted, childcare rising 5.2%, services outpacing goods, are specifically targeted at the time poor. The market knows you have no choice. When you have no time to compare prices, no time to do it yourself, and no time to wait, you become a price taker. The danger of the second rent is that it is sticky. Once you get used to the meal, delivery, going back to grocery shopping feels like a massive decline in your standard of living. Once you get used to the landscaping service, mowing your own lawn feels like a punishment. These conveniences harden into entitlements. This is why the first $100,000 is so difficult. It's not just about earning enough, it's about defending your margin against the encroachment of convenience. The math of compounding requires fuel. That fuel is the gap between income and expense. So how do we break this cycle without making life miserable? We have to stop viewing these costs as isolated decisions. It's just $20 for delivery, and start viewing them as a structural operating expense. You are running a business. Your household is the firm. You have to audit the second rent Which of these conveniences actually buys you high-quality time and which ones just enable you to stay on the hamster wheel? Does the expensive commute actually net you more money after you deduct the cost of the car and the time lost? Getting to that first $100,000 requires a period of unreasonable aggression against these fixed costs. It might mean driving a car that embarrasses you. It might mean moving closer to work to eliminate the commute, even if the house is smaller. The surprising math isn't just that money multiplies. It's that time-saving expenses subtract from your future freedom exponentially. Ultimately, the question isn't whether you can afford the convenience. The bank account says you can. The question is whether you are willing to delay the gratification of a frictionless life today to build a life that is truly free tomorrow. Are you buying time, or are you just renting your own exhaustion?